The story begins in 1901 in the turbulent waters of the Aegean Sea. A team of Greek sponge divers, led by Captain Dimitrios Kontos, sheltering from a storm off the island of Antikythera, made an accidental discovery, an ancient shipwreck lying on the seabed. Among marble statues and amphorae, they brought to the surface a shapeless, encrusted lump of corroded bronze covered in shells and stone. The first diver, surfacing in horror, recounted seeing a pile of decaying female corpses on the seabed. So lifelike were the statues. This ugly lump, however, looked like mere junk. No one suspected that within it lay technology 1,500 years ahead of its time. Several months later, on May 17, 1902, at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, this piece fractured under its own weight, revealing something unthinkable for the ancient world: a complex system of dozens of bronze gears with perfectly cut triangular teeth. Archaeologist Valerios Stais was the first to realize it was not a rock, but a mechanism. It resembled the intricate workings of an 18th century Swiss watch, not an artifact 2 millennia old. The initial shock among scholars was absolute. The discovery seemed like a hoax, an anachronism, an impossible object. To grasp the magnitude of this astonishment, one must consider how the Greeks and Romans were perceived at the dawn of the 20th century. They were known as creators of temples, sculptures, philosophy, and aqueducts. Their engineering was grand in scale, but not precise in detail. It was one thing to perfectly fit the gigantic marble blocks of the Parthenon, and quite another to create a miniature device with coin-sized gears. The very idea that they possessed precision mechanics technology completely contradicted all historical canons. It was akin to finding a jet engine in a pharaoh's tomb. The ship carrying the mechanism was a Roman cargo vessel that sank between approximately 70 and 60 BCE. It was laden with luxury items for wealthy Romans, exquisite glassware, pottery, and magnificent bronze statues, including the famous Antikythera Ephebae. Most likely, it was a cargo of spoils plundered from Greece and en route to Rome. The mechanism was just one part of this cargo, complicating its story further. It was not an isolated strange object, but a fragment of a lost world of high technology and luxury. However, after the initial excitement, the artifact became a museum enigma for decades. It was too complex, too fragmented, and too contradictory. Scholars simply didn't know what to make of it. While the magnificent statues from the same ship became prized jewels of the museum's collection, this bronze lump was relegated to storage. A world rocked by the Balkan Wars, 2 world wars, and immense social upheavals largely forgot about the strange discovery from the seabed. The question of its purpose remained unanswered. It wasn't until the 1950s that serious scientific interest in the mechanism was rekindled. Early researchers, equipped with first-generation X-ray machines, attempted to peer inside the conjoined fragments. The pioneer of this new phase was science historian Derek de Solla Price. Using what by today's standards was primitive gamma radiography, he and his colleagues painstakingly discerned new gears and noted faint Greek inscriptions on the dial surfaces. It was painstaking work, akin to trying to read an erased book through a locked door. The initial hypotheses were very cautious. Perhaps it was a navigational instrument, or an astrolabe, or simply an elaborate toy for a wealthy Roman. No one dared to suggest its true scope. The device's complexity was so far beyond its era that the scientific community instinctively sought a simpler, more mundane explanation. This is a classic example of scientific conservatism, when a fact doesn't fit an existing theory. It's often easier to declare the fact wrong than to revise the entire theory. By the early 1970s, the study of the mechanism had reached a critical point. It was clear that it was something significant, but no one could piece together the entire puzzle. It was a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle of over 80 fragments, with no picture on the box, and most of the pieces lost forever. The artifact awaited a researcher bold enough to accept what the gears implied, that the ancient Greeks had created something Europe couldn't replicate for another 1,500 years. That researcher was Derek de Solla Price, a historian of science from Yale University. He was neither an archaeologist nor a classical antiquity specialist in the traditional sense. Price was a physicist by training, which gave him a completely different perspective on the problem. He saw not just an ancient object, but a functioning machine. From 1951 until his death in 1983, he was obsessed with deciphering its code, becoming the central figure in this scientific story. Armed with the best X-ray images of his time, Price undertook a titanic task. He manually counted the number of teeth on each visible gear by observing the shadows on the film. And these numbers became the key. He discovered gears with 19, 127, and 235 teeth. To an ordinary person, these were just numbers. But to an astronomer, it was music. 235 is the exact number of lunar months in the 19-year Metonic cycle, which the Greeks used to synchronize their lunar and solar calendars. In 1974, Price published his groundbreaking article. His conclusion was a thunderbolt. The Antikythera mechanism was not a clock or a navigational instrument. It was an analog computer, a mechanical cosmos in bronze, which, through an intricate gear system, modeled the movements of the sun, moon, and possibly the planets. He didn't just describe what he saw, he mathematically predicted the existence and parameters of gears that had not yet been discovered, but had to be there for the entire system to function. Price's theory was met with immense skepticism. Especially fantastic seemed the idea that the ancient Greeks had invented a differential gear. This crucial component allows for mechanically adding or subtracting the rotational speeds of two different shafts. Europe rediscovered this principle only in the 16th century for complex clocks, and later it became the basis of the automotive differential. Many scholars accused Price of seeing things that weren't there, of exaggerating. But his mathematical calculations were impeccable. He laid the foundation upon which all further understanding of the artifact would be built. However, for full proof of his claims, the world needed new technologies capable of peering inside the stone. These technologies arrived with the advent of the 21st century. An international team of scientists, the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project, brought unprecedented equipment to Athens. Their primary tool was an 8-ton computer tomograph, which had to be assembled directly within the halls of the National Archaeological Museum because the fragile fragments of the artifact could not be transported. The digital decipherment began. Computer tomography enabled the creation of a complete 3D model of all 82 surviving fragments. For the first time, scientists could virtually disassemble the conjoined mechanism, peer into its heart, and examine every gear and pin without touching the original. But the main breakthrough came from another technology: surface imaging under dozens of different lighting angles. A computer analyzed these images to create an interactive model where virtual light could be manipulated. By manipulating this light, researchers were able to read thousands of text characters, just 1 to 2 millimeters high, hidden beneath centuries of corrosion. The deciphered text proved to be, in essence, an instruction manual. Inscriptions in Koine Greek described the functions of the dials and explained the astronomical cycles the device tracked. Among them was a truly astonishing detail, an inscription that seemingly described the color and size of an upcoming eclipse. This was a direct message from ancient engineers, not only confirming Price's boldest conjectures, but also revealing new, even more surprising functions. The device's history ceased to be a matter of hypothesis and became a documented fact. Digital reconstruction revealed the full genius of its design to the world. It was a shoebox-sized device containing over 30 interlocking gears. The front panel displayed the positions of the sun and moon against a zodiacal circle. The back featured 2 magnificent spiral dials for tracking complex astronomical cycles. The eclipse dial even had special symbols, sigma for lunar and Eta for solar. This was not merely an instrument, it was a cosmos in miniature, a mechanical embodiment of all ancient knowledge about the universe. One of its most astonishing functions was the prediction of eclipses. The upper back dial was calibrated to the Saros cycle, a period of 223 lunar months, after which the sequence of eclipses repeats. But the creators went further. They incorporated an auxiliary dial for the exoligmos cycle, lasting 54 years, which allowed for an 8-hour correction to the time of each new eclipse. This transformed the prediction from a simple "an eclipse will happen" to "an eclipse will happen at this specific time of day." This was no longer just astronomy, but a powerful forecasting tool. The device didn't just indicate the moon's position, it modeled its irregular motion across the sky. The ancient Greeks knew that the moon sometimes sped up and sometimes slowed down. To reproduce this effect, a brilliant mechanism was incorporated: 2 gears mounted with offset centers and a pin sliding in a slot. This system perfectly imitated the moon's complex motion, essentially mechanically implementing what Johannes Kepler would describe in his laws 17 centuries later. This detail demonstrates the incredible level of sophistication in the creator's thinking. The lower back dial connected the cosmos with human life. It displayed the timing of important Panhellenic games, including the famous Olympic Games. Their names, Isthmian, Olympic, Nemean, and Pythian, were inscribed on the 4-year dial. This proves that the mechanism was not merely an abstract scientific instrument, but a practical organizer for a wealthy traveler or statesman. Modern research suggests that the mechanism might have been even more complex. Based on the writings of Cicero, who described a similar device created by Posidonius that showed planetary movements, scholars believe that the lost part of the instrument contained complex epicyclic gearing. These would have tracked the paths of the 5 planets known in antiquity from Mercury to Saturn. If true, then what we see today is merely the shadow of an even more grand and intricate planetarium than we can imagine. Ultimately, the Antikythera mechanism is more than just a calculator. It is a tangible embodiment of Greek philosophy. At its core lay the idea of an ordered cosmos, governed by mathematical laws, in contrast to the barbaric chaos of divine whims. It is a declaration that the universe is a system that the human mind can comprehend, model, and even hold in its hands. But who could have been behind the creation of such a marvel? The mechanism's origin story leads us down 2 main paths. Inscriptions on it, contain month names used in Corinth and its colonies, such as Syracuse, the homeland of antiquity's greatest engineer, Archimedes. Although Archimedes himself died more than 70 years before the shipwreck, the Roman orator Cicero wrote that General Marcellus brought 2 of Archimedes' spheres to Rome after the siege of Syracuse. One was a simple model of the starry sky, while the second accurately predicted the movements of the sun, moon, and planets. It's possible the Antikythera mechanism was created within an engineering school founded by Archimedes, by his followers, who preserved the master's designs and knowledge. However, the island of Rhodes is considered a more likely place of creation today. In the 2nd century BCE, it was a global center for astronomy and precision mechanics. Here, the great astronomer Hipparchus worked, developing the complex theory of lunar motion, the very theory that formed the basis of the mechanism. And it was also here, according to the same Cicero, that the philosopher Posidonius created a similar device which, at each revolution, reproduced the movements of the sun, moon, and 5 planets. It was a dream team, Hipparchus as the theoretician, and possibly Posidonius as the patron or engineer. It's crucial to understand that this mechanism was not the work of a lone genius. Its complexity points to the existence of an entire tradition, a school of precision mechanics about which we know almost nothing. It's like finding a single 14th century smartphone. Such a discovery proves not only the existence of a brilliant inventor, but also an entire lost ecosystem, suppliers of materials, workshops for tool production, and a system for training craftsmen. This was the pinnacle of technological development, built upon decades, if not centuries, of accumulated knowledge. We will likely never know the name of the specific craftsman, but we can confidently say who he was. It was a person or group of people possessing the deepest knowledge in astronomy, mathematics, and mechanics. They were simultaneously scholars, engineers, and skilled artisans, true Renaissance individuals 500 years before the Renaissance itself. But if the ancient Greeks reached such heights, why did this technology disappear? The answer lies in the fragility of knowledge itself. This was not mass production. Such devices were expensive, accessible only to a narrow elite. With the rise of the Roman Empire, the focus shifted from fundamental science to more practical engineering: roads, aqueducts, concrete. The Romans built the hardware of civilization, while the delicate Greek software proved too complex to copy and maintain. Then a series of catastrophes, fires at the Library of Alexandria, economic collapse, the fall of Rome, and the subsequent Dark Ages, broke the chain of knowledge transmission. The secrets of craftsmanship, passed from master to apprentice in workshops, were lost forever. Even more importantly, bronze mechanisms were simply melted down for weapons and coins. Hundreds, if not thousands, of such devices could have been destroyed simply for the value of their material. Humanity had to rediscover this knowledge 1,500 years later. The Antikythera mechanism proves that the history of technology is not a linear progression. It is a path with ascents, descents, and lost peaks. The next device of comparable complexity, Giovanni Dondi's astrarium, was created in Italy in 1364. This represents a technological gap of 1,400 years. This discovery from the seabed is a humble reminder of civilization's fragility. It makes us wonder, how many more Antikythera mechanisms lie in the depths of the ocean or buried beneath the sands of time? Imagine if a global cataclysm destroyed all our servers and digital media. how much of humanity's knowledge would vanish in an instant? The story of this mechanism is not just a tale of the past. It is a warning for the future.